What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. Hope that everybody had a wonderful holiday. I hope that everybody is stuffed and full because we got to talk about what went on during the NFL's Thanksgiving action. The Dolphins fall to the Packers 30-17. They once again failed to get it done in a cold weather environment. Matt Eberflus showed us all today why he is the dumbest head coach in the NFL after his bad clock management costed the Bears the opportunity of potentially upsetting the Lions. And the Dallas Cowboys got some life, people. With their win over the Giants, they now have won 2 straight. And there's a chance that they could get into the playoffs if they win out. But that's the big question. Are the Cowboys capable of being able to win out and sneak into the postseason? Before you dive into it, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop new content and when we go live. Remember that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts from, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. The links are down in the description down below. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to support us, give us a 5-star review. Let's dive into it. The Miami Dolphins fall 30-17 to the Packers on the road in Lambeau. The outcome of this game shouldn't surprise anybody because the Dolphins under Mike McDaniel have struggled in cold weather environments. And tonight was no different. They got beat up on the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line allowed Tua to get sacked 5 times. They only gave their running backs a combined total of 12 carries, and they had 39 rushing yards as a team. And with the style of football that the Dolphins like to play, it doesn't equate to winning football once you get into the latter half of the season, because they always say once you get into the week of Thanksgiving, that's when teams start to separate themselves. That's when the pretenders separate themselves from the contenders, and the contenders separate themselves from the pretenders. And oftentimes, the Dolphins are that team that separates themselves from the contenders as pretenders because they're not built to win late in the season. When you go on the road to Lambeau, you can't win trying to throw the football 40, 50 times in the game. You have to be able to establish your presence up front by running the football, and the Dolphins didn't do that tonight. And it's unexcusable that the ground game struggled due to how good Devon A-Chain has been for the majority of this season. He's been one of the best running backs in all of fantasy football. But the biggest Achilles heel with Mike McDaniel's Dolphins teams is that they're not good up front. And the offensive line has been a lingering issue for this franchise for the last 2 to 3 years. And every time the offseason rolls around, they do bare minimum to address it. And when you are trying to win the Super Bowl, it's hard to do that if you can't win in cold weather climates on the road. The only chance the Dolphins have at winning a Super Bowl with Tua and Mike McDaniel down in South Florida is that they have to win the home field advantage. If they can't get that 1 seed and they're not hosting home playoff games and they got to go on the road to play Kansas City or Baltimore or Buffalo, they're always going to lose, not just because of the playing style that they have where they're more finesse, they want to beat you on the perimeter, but it's also a mentality thing. And tonight, you saw a difference in opposing philosophies. The Green Bay Packers, yes, they did have success throwing the football with Jordan Love, but you saw Josh Jacobs have a ton of good plays in this game. How many good plays did you see out of the Dolphins running backs? Not too many. Was the Dolphins defensive line doing a good job of keeping the Packers run game in check? I felt like they did for the most part, outside of a couple of big plays here and there that they gave up. But there's only so much you can ask your defense to do when your offense is just completely inefficient. And that's what the Dolphins' offense was for the entirety of this game, it felt like. It felt like their offense just couldn't get their feet stuck out of the mud. And moving forward, yes, this loss does hurt Miami's playoff chances, but there still is a path where they win out, they beat the 49ers, they beat the New York Jets, and they're able to get into the dance because none of the teams that they have left to play are better than what they are. I feel like the Dolphins still can get to the playoffs as long as they're able to win. Now, I just felt like you ran into a blizzard today with the Green Bay Packers, and the Green Bay Packers are everything that you need to be if you want to have success this late into the season. And the Miami Dolphins just don't have the horsepower up front to be able to win these cold weather games against a team as good as what the Green Bay Packers are. But they're built to beat a team like the Houston Texans. They can beat the San Francisco 49ers because those teams aren't physical. When the Dolphins are going up against the Green Bay Packers, however, a team that is built off being good up front, having good defensive line play, really good offensive linemen, they get out muscled because they just have this philosophy where we're going to spread the football all over the field, and you can't do that late in the season, man. You got to be able to be physical. You got to be able to have guys that say, you know what? We're not going to get into this game where we just want to try to beat you with speed. We're going to try to beat you with power. But the Dolphins can't do that because that's not what the identity of their team is. And it's shocking that a team that has a head coach from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree has these kinds of struggles, because even though Kyle Shanahan, has a really good scheme and he's more of a guy that seemed to be a little bit more finesse, the 49ers are always really good up front. They're always really good running the football. So I get really shocked at how Miami gets dominated in these games when they got to go to cold weather environments on the road, because with Mike McDaniel coming from that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, you would think that the Dolphins would just have a little bit more physicality than what they tend to play with in these kinds of matchups. Now, for the Packers, you're 9-3 on the season after this win. And I feel you're good enough to beat any team in the NFL. You could beat the Kansas City Chiefs. You could beat the Baltimore Ravens. You could beat the Lions. You could beat the Vikings. You could beat the Philadelphia Eagles. My biggest question is, how consistent can Jordan Love play? Because tonight was one of his better performances. He had no turnovers, 2 interceptions. He completed 21 out of 28 of his passes. This is the same time last year where we saw Jordan Love play his best football. And if Jordan Love can flip that switch like how he did last season, I don't see why the Packers can't potentially be playing for that Lombardi trophy in early February, because the Packers were my preseason pick to win it all. I had them beating the Houston Texans, and although the Texans won't make it to the Super Bowl most likely, the Packers still have a good chance of doing so. And I feel like Green Bay is going a little bit under the radar in terms of their Super Bowl chances. It seems like the media feels it's either going to come down to the Eagles or the Detroit Lions, when really it's a 3-team race at this point. It's going to come down to the Packers, the Lions, or Philadelphia. I still have all of my Super Bowl stock in the Green Bay Packers because they got one of the better rosters in the NFL. You got a really good defense. I don't think Jair Alexander played tonight. He's dealing with an injury, but when he comes back, you're going to have a really good secondary. You got a really good pass rush. And offensively, you don't have a lot of household names, but you have a lot of good young receivers that are good enough to get the job done. And as long as Jordan Love is playing high-level, efficient football, taking care of the ball, minimizing turnovers, the Packers are one of those teams that, any given Sunday, you never know what can happen. They're good enough to compete with the best of the best as long as Jordan Love continues to play this way. So, overall, this win by Green Bay didn't surprise me. I was hammering them money line in the spread all week long because the Dolphins just don't know how to win in these kinds of games. Now, in the first game of the day, the Lions took down the Bears 23-20. And I got a question for y'all. Y'all let me know if I'm being a little bit too harsh. But I believe that Matt Eberflus is the dumbest head coach in the NFL. One thing that I cannot tolerate from any head coach at this level are the ones that don't understand situational football and have awful clock management. So the Bears were trailing by several touchdowns early to start this game, and somehow they were able to get back into it and give themselves an opportunity to not just potentially send this game to overtime, but possibly win it as well. So on their final drive, they get bailed out by a pass interference call by Detroit, which puts them in pretty favorable position to not just potentially get a game-tying field goal, send it to OT, but they also have the possibility of winning this game. But Caleb Williams ends up getting sacked. The right tackle just let one of the Lions pass rushers just blow right past them with ease, gave them no resistance at all, and there's 33 seconds left on the clock, and the Bears have one last timeout. And it's understandable that you don't want to burn that last timeout unless you have no other options. So if you have to use 8-10 seconds to get the next play in and to run it, it's understandable. But one thing that just is pure stupidity is not using that last timeout when you realize that your offense, they're all out of sorts, they're not going to be able to get set to give you 2 more plays, and you just let the rest of the clock run out, and you only won one last play, which you came nowhere close to being able to score. And Matt Eberflus, after the game, he doubled down on the decision not to burn the final timeout, which just is dumb in its own right, because if you know that you made a mistake in that situation, just own up to it and say, yeah, like we kind of effed up in that situation. We should have used that last timeout, because if you call a timeout with, 8 seconds, 10 that runs off the clock because your offense isn't going to get set in time for you to run 2 more plays, you still have 23 seconds left, right? Which gives you 2 more plays to where you either can try to get 6-8 more yards to set up a more favorable field goal, to send it to OT. All Caleb Williams has to do is get downfield and to spike it, or you can attempt 2 plays at the end zone, possibly win the game with a game-winning touchdown. That potentially probably takes up 16 seconds. And if you don't have any success on any one of those touchdown attempts, it still gives you at least 5-6 seconds left to set up the game-tying field goal to send it to OT. You can learn basic situational football, basic clock management by playing any of the Maddens or the college football games that have been out, because managing the clock and understanding situational football is an elementary skill that any coach can learn. There's no excuse for you to be a head coach at this level and you not be able to understand what good situational football is. And this is another game that the Bears have lost where they once again were awful in these late game situations. Remember when they lost that Hail Mary against the Washington Commanders? You got guys not paying attention, Tyreek Stevenson going back and forth, taunting the fans, and the Hail Mary ends up, being the reason why he ends up having to get some discipline after. Because if you're Matt Eberflus in that situation, why wouldn't you not call a timeout when it's the final play of the game? Even though it's a Hail Mary, they got a low success rate. You still want your defense to be prepared for the final play. And then against the Green Bay Packers, you had a blocked field goal, which costed you that win. When you have a team that consistently loses in late games because of bad clock management, a head coach that has a not so good understanding of what good situational football is, it's not going to be a surprise that you're 4-8 and your playoff hopes are all but over around this time of the season. Because once you get into late November, early December, these games are pretty much playoff games for a team like Chicago, which means that they oftentimes are going to come down to the wire, which means that you need to have a good head coach that understands how to manage the clock. And Matt Eberflus has zero understanding of how to do that, which is why he's the dumbest head coach in the NFL. You have one last timeout with 33 seconds and ticking left. Why would you not use one of them? Common sense would tell you, use one of the damn timeouts. If you can't get another play in and you got 5-6 seconds left, then just go ahead and attempt the game time field goal. At least give yourself a chance to win the game. Matt Eberflus costed his team an opportunity to win this game because he just went full-on bozo mode these last 33 seconds. And the fact that he doubled down after the press conference, he should have just got left at Detroit's airport. If you're Ryan Poles, you can't even let Matt Eberflus fly back with the team after this BS that he just pulled today. I'm not a Chicago Bears fan, and I'm proud that I'm not one, because I don't know how any Bears fan can continue to support and watch these damn games when you have a coach who constantly does everything that he can in the final seconds to lose you the ball game. Ryan Poles has to fire this dude right now. He should not be allowed access to the Bears facilities on Friday morning. He needs his key card assets revoked because he fails to understand the most elementary part of being a head coach, managing the clock and understanding good situational football. This was an embarrassing loss for the Chicago Bears organization. It really is. This dude is the dumbest head coach in the league. After what I saw today, it's him and everybody else. You can say it's Nick Sirianni, but at least Nick Sirianni wins games. Matt Eberflus does the complete opposite. He loses you games, maybe on purpose. Now, with the Dallas Cowboys beating the New York Giants today, 27-20, they improved to 5-7 on the year, and if they win out, they can stamp their ticket into the postseason against all odds. But the problem is, for you to win out, you have to beat the Bengals, the Panthers, the Bucks, the Eagles, and the Commanders in your last final 5 games of the season, which I don't think is going to be able to happen. And I think best case scenario for the Cowboys is that you win 4 out of your last 5, you finish the season 9-8, and maybe you got a chance to get that last seed in the NFC. But realistically, I think that it's pretty hard for Dallas to get into the playoffs at this point because you're just so far behind. And the Bengals are a really tough team to beat. Yeah, their defense isn't good, but is Cooper Rush a good enough quarterback to hang 30 on Cincinnati's defense? Is Cooper Rush good enough to go toe-to-toe with Joe Burrow, who has been statistically the best quarterback in the league this year? He's on pace to throw for 40, damn near 50 touchdowns this year. You could beat the Panthers and the Buccaneers, but are you going to be able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders in your final 2 games of the season to cement yourself a spot in the playoffs? I really don't see how it happens. The Cowboys, yes, they are starting to get more healthier. Michael Parsons has been a menace ever since he's returned from his injury. You're going to have Trayvon Diggs and DeRon Bland, who eventually comes back. But offensively, I don't think the Cowboys have enough to be able to get into the playoffs. And let's say you do end up finishing 9-8. What if the Atlanta Falcons finish 9-8? What if they don't hold on to first place in the NFC South? They get surpassed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and all of a sudden, you're vying for the 7th seed with Atlanta when Atlanta would get that because they already beat you early during the season. The Cowboys got themselves in a big hole that is hard for them to dig themselves out of. Even if they are able to win 4 out of their last 5 to get in, you're still going to need some help. You don't control your own destiny. And offensively today, you were mostly assisted by how good your defense played. Michael Parsons had a great game. That linebacker that you have, Overshaw from Texas, he's a monster too. But offensively, with the inconsistencies that you've had from your offensive line, your ground game being up and down, I don't think the Cowboys have enough to win out and to make a late season playoff push. You're asking a lot out of Cooper Rush to be able to go toe-to-toe with Joe Burrow, the Philadelphia Eagles, who have been arguably the second best team in the NFC, right behind the Detroit Lions and the Commanders, who have been a pretty solid team with what you have on offense. Mike McCarthy is a good coach. The problem isn't the coach. The problem is that you don't have a reliable offense. If Dallas defense doesn't play on fire, they don't really have a shot at being able to win the majority of these last 5 games that they have coming up down the stretch, because you're going up against some of the more prolific offenses in the league. Do you think that the Cowboys can hold the Bengals to under 20 points? Because if the Cowboys are going to be able to get into the playoffs, every game has to be a low-scoring game. You were able to win your last 2 games because, the special teams and the defense was able to assist you. But when you're going up against the Bengals, the Bengals are going to drop 30 on you. So you got to be able to drop 30 on them back. And I don't believe that Cooper Rush allows you to do that. You're just so limited offensively that you just need your defense to go pretty much 1985 Chicago Bears for you to have a shot at winning the majority of these last 5 games. Because the Buccaneers have been really hot offensively. The Philadelphia Eagles, we know how potent they are offensively. And the Commanders, they may be slowing down, but they still have enough where they can put 27-28 on your defense. You've been lucky enough where you've been able to somewhat crawl yourself into position to make somewhat of a late season playoff push because you played the Giants. The Giants are not a good team. And the Cowboys haven't been a good team this year neither. They've got blown out several times at home this year. So that shows you that this is a team that, they can beat the bottom feeders in the league, but are you able to beat some of the upper echelon teams in your conference? I don't believe they can. And I'm not hating on the Dallas Cowboys. I think I'm being fairly honest. If you are a Cowboys fan and you think that this team has a shot at making it to the playoffs, I think you're borderline delusional, because just with how up and down your offensive line has been, you don't have a dependable ground game. You need Cooper Rush to play like an MVP candidate for the next month and some change for you to win at least 4 out of your last 5. Put yourself in a 9-8 situation where maybe you can still a playoff spot from Atlanta or somebody like that. But I don't see that happening. Your offense just isn't good enough to be able to hang with the Bengals, the Buccaneers, or even the Eagles. You need your defense to play lights out, and they got to be able to keep every game a low-scoring affair, which is something that the Cowboys, I don't really believe they have the ability to do. When your offense is this inconsistent and they struggle to sustain drives, they're not efficient, you need your defense to create turnovers for you. You have to dominate on special teams. Relying on your defense to create turnovers is not a sustainable way of being able to win, because turnovers are one of those things that fluctuates on a week-to-week basis. It's hard to say, we know our defense can give us 2-3 turnovers a game, when turnovers are one of those stats that you don't necessarily always have control over. It kind of depends on the quarterback. Today, you were fortunate enough to go up against Drew Lock and the Giants offense that just completely sucks. And the Giants are probably the worst team in the NFL right now. They were just flirting with Shedeur Sanders and Coach Prime at Colorado a few days ago. There was a clip floating around on social media of Joe Schoen being at one of Colorado's practices. The Giants are more so focused on trying to tank than they are trying to win ball games. It's nice that you've gone on a 2-game win streak. You've been able to bring back a little bit of optimism to your fan base that maybe you can at least get to the postseason. But, with all the injuries that they have, if they had Dak Prescott fully healthy, then I think that their chances of being able to win out are higher than what they are right now with Cooper Rush. But you really are asking a lot out of your backup quarterback to pretty much play flawless football, because that's what he needs to do these last 5 games if the Cowboys are going to make it to the playoffs. He has to play flawless football. No turnovers, no crucial incompletions in big moments, and you need your defense to be able to slow down some of the NFL's top offenses. And I don't really think that's going to happen. For the Cowboys, I think they end up fighting hard to close out this year. They finish 8-9, and they miss out on the postseason. You just dug yourself in too deep of a hole that it's too deep for you to climb out of this late into the season with how many good teams that you have coming up. Your margin for error is incredibly low with the hole that you dug yourself in, and that's why I don't see the Cowboys having any shot at making it to the playoffs despite their win against the Giants today.